Everyone. So I hope you had a good lunch and you are now in not too much lunch, just the right amount, the middle way when it comes to lunch. Too much is always a bad idea, too little also a bad idea. So middle way, as the Buddha always recommends. So let us continue where we left off. We were looking at the second verse of this famous Bad Ekarata Sutta, and the verse basically saying that phenomena in the present are clearly seen in every case. And we're discussing this idea, what this means. And of course, we're going to see how the Buddha talks about this in a second, because the explanation of the Buddha comes afterwards. But I think it's often also useful to understand these often in a more kind of ordinary way, because the way the Buddha explains things is often very profound. And very often you may feel a bit left out. If you just listen to the Buddha, you may feel that this does not apply to me. And that sometimes happens because the suttas tend to look at things from a very high point of view. So it's useful to kind of come back to the ordinary ways and that these things are to be understood. So when we talk about seeing phenomena in the present, as I mentioned before, we are talking about understanding whatever is happening in the daily, even in daily life. Yeah, understanding, being aware, having some degree of awareness of your mental states, being sure that you regulate your emotional life in a reasonably good way. You don't get upset too easy. You have a sense of compassion and care for the people around you. And when you have these, if you use ordinary awareness of daily life in this way, it's going to be very powerful because it undermines the defilements of the mind. It purifies you, and in the long run, it leads you towards more powerful meditation as a consequence. So it starts, seeing phenomena begins like this, and then as your mind is purified to a sufficient state, then it allows meditation to happen. Yeah, it's kind of interesting when your mind is reasonably pure. You sit down, you meditate, and you find that meditation is so much easier. Yeah, before you may not have been able to watch the breath properly because your thoughts were kind of going all over the place, or you're feeling a lot of tiredness and lethargy and these kind of things. But then one day, because you practice in the right way, you purify yourself, it is as if the mindfulness becomes natural. And when the mindfulness becomes natural, meditation becomes possible. So seeing phenomena in the present, when mindfulness is natural, is quite easy. Yeah, it just means that you are sitting back, you are mindful, the breath is there, and you can follow the breath with a fair amount of ease. So this is another aspect of the idea of clearly seeing phenomena in the present. Sometimes you may think that, well, seeing phenomena in the present is a kind of vipassana practice. It's a practice whereby you learn to see the arising and passing away of things. But remember that samatha and vipassana are not really separable. So if you do mindfulness of breathing, and we will look at this later on, you are in fact practicing both samatha and vipassana. You are giving rise to more clarity. You're seeing things more clearly, as well as becoming more calm. These two things have to go together. They cannot really be separated. So by watching the breath very carefully in this particular case, you are practicing both samatha and vipassana, the clear seeing of the breath. And then you practice that mindfulness of breathing. You take it deeper and deeper. Yeah, it goes down and down and down. You become more and more peaceful. The meditation becomes more and more powerful until eventually you enter the states of samadhi. Yeah, your famous states of samadhi you find in the suttas, the jhanas and all of these pre-jhana states. One of the things that is so remarkable about the Buddhist path is that there's so much happiness and so much peace to be had before you get to the jhanas. Yeah, it's this wonderful and amazing path of just more and more peace, more and more bliss, until eventually you get to the jhana states themselves. And so you deepen that knowledge. And as it says in this verse, after clearly seeing in every case, it says, knowing this, foster it. Foster it means like to develop it. Yeah, you develop it, you make much of it. You make sure that meditation is taken as deep as you possibly can. And then the last two words there are kind of interesting: unfaltering and unshakable. These are, the idea here is that when the meditation becomes very profound, your mind becomes very solid and very stable and very able to see things that you have never seen before, things that are very hard to see, things that, things that might scare you if you saw it in an ordinary mind state, because the delusion that we have is challenged. And when you challenge delusion, actually it can become scary. Yeah, just like you see something that you're not used to seeing. That is always kind of challenging to us. So you need this very powerful mind. And when you have this very powerful mind, unfaltering and unshakable, kind of implying the jhana states, implying deep states of meditation, that is when you are ready to really see things in the full way, all the way to enlightenment in self, certainly to stream entry, but all the way to enlightenment itself. So you can see how these two verses are they're very deep and they're very all-encompassing. Almost the entire path is kind of included in these verses here. At the very beginning, when we talk about not turning back to the past and the future, in the large aspect, it is about right view, looking at the world in the right way. And with that right view comes the ideas of compassion for the world, of not being angry with the world, and all of these kind of things. Comes the samma sankappa, and also the element of renunciation, which means giving up the ordinary world, which then allows you to enter samadhi states and eventually see things according to reality, because your mind is very powerful. There's a lot of information in those two verses, and you can read them in a profound way or in a more ordinary way, but there's a lot of information in there. It's very kind of fascinating to kind of pull them apart a little bit. So then comes the last two of the verses here, and the third verse, again, I'll just read it out again. Today's the day to keenly work. Who knows tomorrow may bring death? For there is no bargain to be struck with death and his mighty hordes. Yeah, so this is a reminder that the time to practice, the time to live in a good way, the time to forgive, the time to have compassion, the time to understand things in the right way, the time to say a kind word to people around you, the time to all of these things that are so important on the Buddhist path. Now is the time, not later on. Right in this moment, right now is the time to have the right kind of thought. Because if you don't do it now, basically it may never happen. It is so easy to procrastinate because we think that there are other things in the world that are more important. Yeah, you've got to get that project sorted out. You have to get some work done that is very important for you. And all of these kind of things. And so all the things in the world tend to seem more important than the spiritual path. But remember, it is actually the other way around. It is a spiritual path that is more important, because all the things in the world, all they do is that they do a little bit for you in this life, and they have a little bit of effect on how you experience the world, but only a tiny amount of effect. What really matters for how you live your life, what really matters for how you experience this life itself, is actually the spiritual qualities that you have with you. And I'm sure many of you are aware of this already, but it's so important to turn things the right side up and not get them the wrong way around. And so the way to think about this, when you remember the idea that you're going to die, life is short, we don't know how long this life is around. When you remember that, it means that you place spirituality, kindness, the idea of mental development on the top, and all the worldly things underneath that. The other things come underneath. Spirituality is the prime reason why we are in this life in the first place. This is what life really is about. So everything should come back to the idea of spirituality. And what that means is that when you can still do the ordinary things in your life. We have to do the ordinary things. We have to look after our jobs and families. We can't throw these things out. They are important things. Even in monastic life, there are a number of worldly things that you have to do. It's just part of existence. You don't have much choice in it. But you remember, you remember that even when you do your worldly things that need to be done, you do them in a way that is spiritual. You do them in a way where you remember how you are doing these things. You don't allow yourself to be carried away by the worldly things. You remember what actually matters. And to be able to do this, this is why the Buddha here brings in the idea of death. Death is one of these very powerful contemplations in Buddhism. It's one of these things that the Buddha recommends everywhere in the suttas. And he always talks about death as being one of the things everyone should contemplate. Everyone should contemplate death. And the Buddha specifically says lay people and monastics. He says women and men. So everyone there should contemplate death. The only ones that are not mentioned are the animals. The animals don't have to contemplate death because it's too hard for animals to contemplate death. But if you are born as a human being, you should contemplate death. He doesn't say anything about ghosts and devas, but they too probably should contemplate death, right? It's a very broad thing here. It would be interesting whether the Buddha, I don't think the Buddha ever said to the devas, you should contemplate death, but they should, because this matters even for the devas. They too need to live well. And death is such a powerful thing because death is like this barrier, it's like the end of our life. And when you remember that you're going to die, you also remember what is important in life. Because if you remember yourself, you see yourself on your deathbed, all the things in the world become irrelevant. Remember what I said before, when you look back to your past life, all the things that you were attached to in your past life, all the things that meant something to you in your past life, it's all gone. Can't access it anymore. It's become irrelevant. And death is that barrier in this life. You want to, at that point, all you care about are the qualities that you have built up that you can take with you into the future. And these are precisely the spiritual qualities. So death is something that makes our mind become straight. It makes us see things in a way which actually allows us to remember what is really important in life. It gets our priorities sorted out when we remember death. So please make the idea just of reminding yourself that you're going to die. I'm going to die, for goodness sake. And not only am I going to die, I don't know when I'm going to die. What if I'm going to die right now? Am I ready to die right now? Feel inside of yourself if you're ready to die right now. And if you're not ready to die right now, you've got to get ready. Because actually, because we never know, the only time we can be ready is now. So these are the kind of questions that sometimes we can ask ourselves. And when we ask ourselves these questions, and then we do some death contemplation, maybe we can do a guided death meditation later on. It's kind of nice to do a guided death meditation because actually it's very pleasant to do death meditation. People think that death meditation is very scary. No, it is very pleasant. It's very peaceful if you know how to do it and you do it in the right way. It's peaceful because you tend to let go. Death reminds you that there's nothing to hold on to. And when you let go, you become peaceful. By renouncing, peace arises in your mind as a consequence. So death is another thing that we can bring into this. The idea of death, bring into this to make this whole process of letting go of things more powerful. And often the idea of death really deserves a whole talk in its own right because it's actually very, very beautiful, and the Buddha talks about these things in many places in the suttas. But I think for the purposes of this particular retreat, maybe that this is probably about enough about the idea of dying. But please use this because the Buddha talks about this. You know that the idea of death is very important in the suttas because you see it in many different places. The Buddha talks about it again and again and again. This idea of bringing this up. And then you find that actually you become a better person as a consequence. It's very strange. People are afraid of death, but we are all going to die. We don't have any choice in the matter. It's going to happen. And so you might as well get used to it. And if we're not used to it, it's going to be much more difficult when it eventually happens. So I would really recommend you to contemplate this occasionally. So let's look at the end here. Yeah, the Buddha says this beautiful saying here, first of all, the third verse, there is no bargain to be struck with death and his mighty hordes. And this is Mara and the hordes of Mara. There is no bargain. Yeah, you cannot pray to Mara and say, Mara, please, I don't want to die. It doesn't work. No bargain can be struck. There's no business deal. Mara doesn't do business deals. Mara just kind of slaughters you down and cuts your life short. And there you are, finished. And there's no business. I will give you everything I own. Please, please, keep me alive. Whatever you want, I will give it to you. And then sorry, just something happened here. What happened to the screen?
Yeah, sorry, Ajahn, I did something.
Yep. Okay, there we are. Okay, so Mara doesn't do any business deals. Now, it's interesting, one of the little stories that actually come to mind right now from the suttas, which is kind of fascinating here. This is a very famous story of Jivaka. You may have heard about Jivaka. Jivaka was the Buddha's physician, the Buddha's doctor, and he was also the doctor of the whole Sangha. And there's a long story about Jivaka found in the Vinaya Pitaka, which tells a little bit about his background, how he became a doctor, and how he was very clever, very skilled. There is the first occurrence of brain surgery, right? Brain surgery. This was done by Dr. Jivaka. I think this may be very well the first occurrence of brain surgery in the world. I don't know. I don't think there is any other literature about brain surgery, but it's actually found in the suttas. So he opens up the skull. You can imagine opening up someone's skull 2,500 years ago. It would have been quite scary. I don't know how they did that, but that's what they did. It's kind of astonishing. Brain surgery at the time of the Buddha. So he was a very special doctor. And because he was so special, everyone wanted to have him as a doctor. Yeah, and one of the famous stories is all the people they ordained to become monks because they knew the only way they could get access to Jivaka as a doctor was to become a monk. If you were not a monk, if you were a layperson, he didn't have any time for you. He only had time for the monks and for the king and for the king's kind of entourage, the king's kind of workers or whatever, and wives, but not for anyone else. So people would ordain to become monks. Then they would go to Jivaka and say, I'm a monk, please treat me, I have this illness. And then Jivaka would treat them, and then they would disrobe. And then Jivaka would say, but you were a monk just a few days ago. How come you're a layperson now? Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to be treated by you. Sorry, that's the only reason I became a monk. So then Jivaka, he went to the Buddha and said, please stop people to becoming monks just to be treated by me. And this is why one of the reasons we have a rule in the Vinaya Pitaka that says that you have to be healthy to become a monk. There are certain illnesses you cannot have. But then there was all these other people, very, very wealthy people at the time of the Buddha. The world has always been the same. Lots of ordinary people and then a few very, very wealthy people. And these wealthy people, like everyone else, sometimes they become very ill. So they will go to the Jivaka and they will say, I will give you everything I own in life, I will give to you if you can make me healthy again. Please cure me of this illness. I will give you everything. Not only will I give you everything, I will also become your slave. That's what they said. Yes, I will become your slave, and then please give me everything, and I will give you everything at the same time. And that's kind of fascinating. It shows you the fear of death. Yeah, we would like to do anything. We would like to bargain with Mara. We would like to say to Mara, I will pay you, if I possibly can, everything. I don't want to die here. So if you want to avoid that, if you want to avoid getting to the end of your life and being in this precarious position where you want to bargain with Mara, build up those good qualities now. And if you have a lot of good qualities within, you will not be afraid of death. Yeah, we are afraid of death because we fear the future, because we fear what's going to happen on the other side. And we also are also afraid of letting go. But if you have a heart of metta, if you have a heart of compassion, really develop metta to the very highest extent. If you have compassion for the whole world, even for those little irritating insects you get during meditation practice, yeah, all of that. If you have compassion for all of those things and you have metta for the whole world, you will never be afraid of death. Death is just like another transition. You are transitioning from one state to another. You don't know what the future will bring exactly, but you know it's going to be good. You know the future will be good. This is kind of the point of having metta practice. You're no longer afraid of what is going to happen later on. Have you had that feeling before? Where you feel that, wow, I feel so much kindness for the whole world. And when you have that powerful feeling inside of kindness for everyone in the whole world, everything, all human beings, all animals, all ghosts, you feel kindness towards the ghosts, not afraid of the ghosts. Everything, yeah, you have kindness towards. At that point, you don't have any fear anymore. Even the idea of dying, you know that nothing bad can happen to you as a consequence. Very powerful side effect, if you like, of practicing metta. The fear of death is completely gone. And the other kind of beautiful side effect of metta, not being afraid of death is one of them, but I was saying before about the idea of giving up attachments to the things in the world, yeah, and how wonderful it can be to give up those attachments. And that is true, but to be able to give up attachments can be very difficult very often, because even if you do these kind of contemplations, it may be that your mind is not ready to give up those attachments. But if you have metta, if you have kindness, if you have compassion in your heart, if you have these good qualities within, then the idea of letting go is far, far easier. This is why these things always come together. That is why the three sankappas, the three samma sankappa, the three right intentions go together as one package deal. Yeah, you have the avyapada sankappa, which is like metta. You have the ahingsaka sankappa, which is like compassion, and then you have the nekama sankappa, which is the intention to renounce, and they come together. Kindness comes together with renunciation, because it is only when you have something more profound that renunciation really becomes possible. So we should never renounce out of ill will. We should never give up because we are irritated with somebody. Yeah, I'm going to renounce my friendship with you because I don't like you or I have a hard time with you. If you renounce a friendship like that because you have a hard time with somebody, it is going to be very bad. It's not going to work. It is not real renunciation. Renunciation comes when you have metta. Renunciation comes when you feel kindness to everyone around you, and then you renounce. Yeah, you renounce attachment. You don't renounce kindness. You renounce attachment to that person. Metta, renunciation coming together. Never try to force yourself to renounce through an act of ill will or whatever. Then it's going to be very problematic. Yeah? So this is the idea of death and how to avoid some of the problems around death. And then we have the very last verse of this little poem, and it goes as follows again. The peaceful sage explained, it's those who keenly meditate like this, tireless all night and day, who truly have that one fine night. Yeah, the peaceful sage, the beautiful word Santo Muni. This is the Buddha, of course, the peaceful sage. And he is the one who explained that this is how, if you want to have a really good night, it is one who practices in this way all day and night, then you know you had one fine night indeed. This is really a fine night. And of course, the majority of people think you are crazy if you say this is a fine night. Majority of people, they want to enjoy themselves, they want to amuse themselves, they want to go out, they are fed up of COVID restrictions, now they want to go back to the nightclubs and the entertainments around the world, or whatever it is. But the person who is really on the spiritual path, they just want to be peaceful. They want to be left to themselves. They want to contemplate death even. And it's kind of crazy how different we are as when you practice a spiritual path compared to when you're an ordinary person in the world. So this is how you become that peaceful sage. At Bodhinyana Monastery, we have one of the Anagarikas. If you have been here, he calls himself Santo Muni. I guess he's trying to be a bit like the Buddha, perhaps. I'm not sure. So this is the path. This is the way to having a really successful night. When you have that clarity of mind, you have insight, you have a lot of joy and happiness as a consequence. And of course, this kind of joy and happiness you get from this kind of experience is far more profound than anything you can find in the world. And this is why this is the higher way of spending a good night. One fine night indeed. So that is my brief commentary. It's only a brief commentary on those verses. But we want to have a look at how the Buddha explains this as well. So, because the way the Buddha explains things, as I always say, is always more profound. Yeah. So we want to see what the Buddha has to say. So then the Buddha says, he said, and that's what I meant when I said, I shall teach you the passage for recitation and the analysis of one fine night. That is what the Buddha said. Oh, no, we have lost a large part of the sutta. Yeah. We have to go back up again, please. The middle part is gone. Yeah, that whole part is gone. Yeah. Higher up, please. Yeah. That's it. That's good. Yeah, yeah. You can go down. You can go down to the prose passage now. So now the Buddha is going to explain, what he means. Well, this is the part right here. So this is the Buddha's way of explaining this. And how do you not run back to the past? You muster delight there, thinking, I had such form in the past. I had such feelings in the past. I had such perceptions in the past. I had such choices, or intentions in the past. I had such consciousness in the past. That's how you run back to the past. And so what the Buddha is saying here is very similar to what I was saying before, this idea of thinking about the past, going through the photo album, seeing those old pictures and thinking, wow, it was so nice before, I was young and everything was good, my body, wow, such form. When you say such form in the past, it just means the body, basically, what you looked like before, and you kind of now you grieve because you have lost the beauty of youth or whatever it is, and you're getting old and weak. I was so strong in the past, now weakness is kind of overtaking me, and all of these kind of things. It is as simple as that. It is just any kind of way where we grieve over what happened in the past. You had such feelings in the past, the idea that in the past, I was more happy in the past, but now somehow the happiness seems to be gone, In the past, I had perceptions. In the past, my meditation was better. My meditation has gone down. I had perceptions of happiness. In the past, I used to live in a different house. I had this beautiful house around me. That perception of house has now gone. Oh, I don't have that anymore. Anything that you think about the past and you think it was better, The choices I had in the past, maybe the idea is here that in the past I was more able to choose what I wanted, because in the past maybe I was more wealthy, or I was more able to choose because I was stronger in the body, or whatever. My ability to choose was greater in the past. And consciousness, well, that's just awareness of what happened in the past. So this is really just a way of dividing up the past in a certain way. But really, it is no different from thinking about the past in any particular way. Whenever you are controlled by the past and you hold on to that, that is when you have this kind of problem. And the idea of dividing it up into the 5 khandhas that you see here is just to enable you to focus a bit more clearly on what is going on, pinning it down. And the 5 khandhas are, of course, the framework for understanding the idea of non-self. And because they are the framework for understanding non-self, then that is why they are used in this particular way right here. So we are dealing with the idea of not running back to the past. Yeah, how do you run back to your past? You think about these 5 khandhas, you think, wow, it was so nice. Or it can be that you feel bad about the past and you have had a trauma in your life. It's very common for people to have some kind of trauma. And then you think about the past and you feel, oh no, that was terrible. And you carry the past with you into the present and into the future. So these are 2 opposite ways, 2 opposite things that can happen here. And so we need to let go of that. Yeah, we need to kind of not do this. And the way to do that is, well, if it is a trauma that you had in the past, you need to forgive. You need to forgive whatever people were there, whatever people may have treated you in a bad way. You need to at least try to forgive. Yeah, slowly moving in the right direction. It can be very hard to forgive if someone has treated you very, very badly, maybe as a child or whatever. But still, you can do a little bit. Yeah, and by thinking in the right way, by remembering that these people are just following habits. They often don't know what they're doing. They try to be kind, but don't really understand what kindness is. And maybe they were treated bad in return by other people. And so by thinking like this, you can you can let go of some of the traumas of the past, at least a little bit. You can reduce the pain of the past. And if you are attached to some kind of happiness in the past, then remember, first of all, what I said before. It's very hard to remember the past. We never see the past in the right way. We tend to think of the past in a certain way, but actually it is very likely that it was quite different. Sometimes all we remember are the good times, we forgot about the bad times. And by having a realistic idea of the past, you can start to let go. And the other idea that I was mentioning before is the idea of now is when you make your future. You don't make your future by thinking about the past. If you think about the past and you're attached to that, you are not doing anything at all for your future. In fact, the opposite, more likely, you are dragging yourself down. You're making your future worse by thinking about the past, because attachments and holdings on, these are just cravings, and these cravings will often lead you astray. And sometimes they lead you to maybe do things, make bad choices, and all of these kind of things. So now is the time to move forward. Now is the time to look to the future. And looking to the future means living well, not fantasizing about the future, not thinking about the sensory realm. And then you are on the right track. So a little bit of wisdom like this, a little bit of reflecting in the right way should help you to let go of the past a little bit. And this is the next one the Buddha says. How do you not run back to the past? You don't find delight there. I prefer find delight. You don't find delight there thinking, I had such form in the past. I had such feelings in the past. I had such perceptions in the past. I had such choices in the past. I had such consciousness in the past. And that's how you don't run back to the past. It's funny because the way the Buddha says it, it is just so kind of short. Yeah, it is. You just do it. You don't think about it. That's all, and you're kind of finished with it. And it sounds so easy when you say it in that way. But and this is why it is useful to have a bit of commentary, because it's not easy to know exactly how you're supposed to do this. The Buddha just says, "Don't do it," and that's really all he says. So use some of these techniques. Use some of the techniques the Buddha talks about elsewhere in the suttas. We'll talk much more about this later on. Some of the similes the Buddha talks about for the sensory realm and all of these kind of things. And all of these things will help you to let go of the past and also the future. And in fact, the entire sensory realm altogether, you can let go of through these ideas. And this is one of the problems sometimes with the suttas. The suttas are so short. They just give you a very bare bones. They give you like the skeleton, and then we have to kind of add the meat to the skeleton. It's not easy. You read this and you think, okay, this is all very good, but it doesn't really give you all that much information on how to do these things. And this is why we have commentaries. And the commentaries, they often help you to find these solutions. And I have always liked Ajahn Brahm commentary, the famous commentary by Ajahn Brahm. Whenever Ajahn Brahm gives a talk, that's called the Ajahn Brahm commentary. Very useful, yeah, because it gives you information about these things. And right now, I am giving a commentary on this, and I try also to do the same thing, bring out the meaning of this. How can we actually do it? And in the end, you have to become your own commentary. Yeah, you have to find out yourself what you think. Yeah. And sometimes people do that. They come to me and say, "Oh, this is what I think. Is that right?" And that's great. Please do that. Please think about these things for yourself and find ways of dealing with these issues so that you can also give rise to that mindfulness and let go of the past or the future in this way. And the Buddha says, and how do you hope for the future? You find delight there thinking, may I have such form in the future? May I have such feeling in the future? May I have such perceptions in the future? May I have such choices in the future? May I have such consciousness in the future? That's how you hope for the future. Yeah, this is like the simile of the dream. Yeah, and I didn't mention this before, but it's a beautiful simile. I'll come back to it later on as well. This idea, the idea of the future that we have in our minds, where we're going to go, where we're going to be here. When you are young, when you go into university, you often have very strong ideas about what is going to happen in your life. You have strong ideas about what kind of work you're going to have, strong ideas about who you're going to be married to, who's going to be your wife or husband, strong ideas about how successful you're going to be or whatever it is. And so we always look to the future. It is especially true when we are young, and then you fall in love with someone. This is what happens when you are young. And then when you fall in love with someone, it is so completely unrealistic. We have these crazy ideas about what it's like to be in a relationship. Yeah? And we all know that when you get married, it is actually quite different. It is not really like that relationship that we thought it was going to be. Yeah, it is just so utterly uncertain. So we have the hopes for the future, and the hopes are not true. Life is never the way we think it is going to be. You're looking forward to buying a new house. And then you forget that when you get that new house, and that house is like a perception here, yeah? It's a feeling, so it's part of these things. May have this perception and feeling. We forget that the house needs to be cleaned. There's a lot of work cleaning the house. We forget that the house starts to deteriorate. You have to repair it all the time, yeah? We forget that there is a mortgage you have to pay off. We forget that other people may be not treating your property with the respect that it deserves. There's all these downsides, but when you think about it in your mind, it sounds so beautiful. It sounds so wonderful to have this house. And, my house, I have a house too. It's called the Kuti. It's a small house at Bodhinyana Monastery. It's 7 square meters large, 7 square meters. And 7 square meters is just exactly right. It's just enough to sleep. There's enough to have a desk in there. I can do a bit of work, and just enough to have my meditation seat. Yeah, and that's all there is. And very easy to clean. It takes about 5 minutes to clean it out. Very, very efficient way of cleaning the place. So I am really, really happy with my tiny little Kuti. And sometimes I look at all these big houses, in Perth. There are so many large houses along the river, beautifully on the ocean front and very nice. And I think, no way I want to live in those mansions. Sometimes they are like mansions, enormous. Yeah? And sometimes the problem with those mansions is that they are often too close together. There's one next to the other one. But when I come back to Bodhinyana Monastery, I have one Kuti by myself in the forest, completely isolated from everyone else, where it is peaceful, it is quiet. All I have is the kangaroos and the mosquitoes as my friends, yeah? And sometimes even the mosquitoes, actually, if they don't, I don't know if they are friends, but they're all right if you get used to them. And it is far better to live in nature like that, in a small place, than to have a large mansion in a crowded city. Far, far better. It is so much more conducive to happiness. Yeah, you actually feel happiness in a little cutie like that. You're living in a big mansion in the city. It doesn't do very much for you at all. So our ideas about the future are so wrong. And again, as I was saying before, what you do then, once you understand that all this dreaming that we have about the future, all the fantasies we have about the future, they're always false. They're always fake. It never works out like that. The future is always going to be different from what you think it is. And you start to realize that because of the uncertainty of that future, because it depends not only on your work or what you make out of it, it depends on all of these things over which you have no control. You have no control of what's happening in the world. You have no control of what's happening with the government very often. We don't have any control over the environmental issues in the world. We have no control over the next wars. It's just so uncertain. And then you let it go. You let it be. You don't worry about it anymore. And you start to know, actually, my future, I'm going to make it right now by being kind, by being a good person, by having a good heart, by meditating, by being peaceful and compassionate and kind and caring and having a sense of metta for everyone. That is what I'm going to do. And then you are creating a future. Then you have hope for the future. But that is not a hope that you dream about. That is a hope that you create now by being kind. It is not a hope that you think about. It is a hope that it is just a future that emerges from your present actions. So in that sense, it is quite different. So how do you not hope for the future? Well, again, you do not find delight in the future. Yeah, because there's nothing there to find delight in. Thinking, may I have such form in the future? May I have such feelings in the future? May I have such perceptions in the future? May I have such choices in the future? May I have such consciousness in the future? That's how you don't hope for the future. So you avoid the hoping for the future. And because you understand that the future is just too uncertain. And one of the little mantras that I've been using recently, which is kind of really nice, and I've been telling people about, is the mantra, expect the unexpected. Expect the unexpected. Understand that the world is always going to throw up something really out of left field, something you had never expected at all. So expect the unexpected. And it's a beautiful little saying. You may think, well, that's an oxymoron. That's just, that's a contradiction in terms. How can you expect the unexpected? But the truth is that you cannot, of course, expect specific things to happen. That's impossible. But what you can have a general idea of expecting the unexpected. The fact that you don't become surprised, when suddenly the world goes in the wrong direction, or if the world goes in the right direction or whatever. You're not surprised at anything because you know the unexpected will always happen. And then when you do that, it kind of undermines our trust that we can predict what is going to happen in the future, because we cannot predict. And because we cannot predict, it makes the future less interesting. And when the future is less interesting, because it's always going to be unexpected, because of that, we start grasping onto that future. We start thinking about it. We start having hopes about it. And then the meditation starts to happen instead. So it's quite powerful, and it goes against the grain of the world. Maybe some of you think that I'm going too far because this is not how people in lay life can live. Actually, you can live a little bit like this in lay life. Maybe it's difficult to take it as far as, as enlightenment or whatever, but you can lean in this direction, because this is just common sense when you think about it. I'm sure many of you will know that what I'm saying is true. It may be a painful truth. It may be a truth that we don't really want to hear, but it's true nonetheless. This is the kind of truth that all the sages, all the meditation masters throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia have understood. This is how they give up the world. They expect the unexpected. They know that this is the right way of thinking about life. So let us come down to the very last part here. How do you falter amid presently arisen phenomena. It is when an uneducated, ordinary person has not seen the noble ones and is neither skilled nor trained in the teachings of the noble ones. They are not good persons and are neither skilled nor trained in the teaching of the good persons. Yeah? They regard form as self, self as having form, form in self, or self in form. They regard feeling as self, feeling self as having feeling, feeling in self, or self in feeling. They regard perception as self, self as having perception, perception in self, or self in perception. They regard choices as self, self as having choices, choices in self, or self in choices. They regard consciousness as self, self as having consciousness, consciousness in self, or self in consciousness. That is how you falter amid presently arisen phenomena. So what does this mean? And this was what this lady Susie was asking before, and only now are we coming to it, always a little bit behind the times. Takes a bit of time to get to these things. And what this means, and this has many different levels of meaning here, but the immediate level of meaning, first of all, you will have noticed that this is about the uneducated person, the ordinary person who has not heard the teachings of the noble ones. So this would be someone who has never heard about the Buddhist teachings. Someone who is not a Buddhist has no idea about these teachings. For us, well, we are somewhere in between because we have heard a little bit of these teachings, but we may not have the full understanding yet. So we're moving towards that full understanding here. So what is it that is going on here? And what is going on here is just the attachments that you have right now. This is what this is referring to. It may not be obvious that it is referring to this, but actually it is, and it's just a very comprehensive and detailed way of referring to the attachments in the present. So for example, you take form as self. What does that mean? Well, it means that you are regarding this body as yours, or you have self as having form, It means that the self has the body, which kind of makes sense, this body is mine, Don't touch my body. Keep your hands away. This is my body. You can't just kill me, Because if you kill me, you are destroying my body. I won't have that. I don't want you to kill me. You can't just chop off my hand, Because if you chop off my hand or my finger, you are attacking me. This is my body. This belongs to me. So if you feel that someone should not injure you, someone doesn't have the right to kind of hurt you or whatever, if you are attached to your body, this is what this means. You are attached to your body. And these are just different ways of thinking about that attachment, Either you identify as the body, I am the body, or you think of the body as yours, or you think of maybe the five khandhas as the self, and the body is within the five khandhas, or somehow your self is inside the body. Maybe the idea that you have a soul which somehow resides within the body, But in all of these cases, form is somehow related to you, and you consider it yours. And of course, many of you do that. We all consider our body to be ours to some extent. It's very difficult to avoid that. But because you are a Buddhist, you have some idea that this maybe even though you feel like that, maybe you know also, maybe this isn't true. Maybe this body is not really mine. How do you do that? How do you see that the body is not yours? And this was what the lady Susie was asking about before. How do you do that? Do you just think this body is not mine? Do you use this like a mantra in your meditation practice? The best way of seeing that the body is not yours, is to practice meditation. Calm yourself down. Watch the breath. have as few defilements as possible. And as you calm down, one of the things that you will notice is that the body starts to fade away. The body starts to disappear. Gradually. This is called viraga in the suttas. You find this specifically in the Anapanasati Sutta, the sutta on mindfulness of breathing. We'll be looking at this sutta later on, and you will see that this is exactly what the Buddha is talking about. Viraga, the fading away of form. And it fades away. There's less and less. The body disappearing in the background. Maybe all you have left is the breath. Yeah, everything else is gone except for the breath. There comes a point when all you have is maybe the nimitta, yeah, the kind of bright light in the mind, the beautiful mind, and all of these kind of things. And eventually, the body is completely gone. And when the body is completely gone, you know for the first time that form is not self, or the body is not self. Because it's completely gone. It's outside of your experience. You no longer have access to the body. And this is how you understand these things. So it's useful to have a preliminary understanding. Yeah, it's useful to have some idea that this is probably true. And we can probably see this at least partially in your own meditation practice. But the real experience really happens in meditation. And of course, what you find is that it is delightful. Yeah, this is one of the most wonderful experiences in your life when the body is gone. You feel, wow, I had no idea the body was such a burden. I had no idea it was so heavy. I had no idea it was so problematic. But now I understand, because I have extracted myself from the body completely. Now I feel much better as a consequence. This body is useless. Get rid of this blooming body. I don't want to have anything more to do with it. And that's kind of how you feel, yeah? And all you want to do afterwards is just meditate more and more, because you understand that this body is just a heavy burden in your life. So this is the idea of how you actually understand this. Yeah, and you understand it in a very positive way. It is not scary at all. In fact, it is incredibly attractive. You understand why these things are non-self and how these insights gradually come about as a consequence. And it is a similar story with feeling, a similar story with perception, choices, and consciousness. Yeah, all of these things we take as ourself. Yeah, I mean, you are the chooser in your life. I am the doer, yeah, because you are the agent and the doer. You see that as yourself. And through meditation, you start to see that the doer fading away actually is a very beautiful experience. So this is how you see this. Don't make it too theoretical. Have a basic theoretical understanding of what is happening, but then really see it, understand it during your meditation practice. And then you don't falter in this way. So the Buddha says, how do you not falter amid the presently arisen phenomena? It is when an educated noble disciple has seen the noble ones and is skilled and trained in the teaching of the noble ones. Yeah, in other words, you have listened to the suttas. You have listened to people who are noble. Yeah, it can be hard to know sometimes, but you have, by some accident, you have hit upon someone who really is an Arya and a noble person. Then you hear the two teachings. They have seen good persons and are skilled and trained in the teaching of the good persons. They don't regard form as self, self as having form, form in self, or self in form. They don't regard feeling as self, self as having feeling, feeling in self, or self in feeling. They don't regard perception, choices, consciousness as self, self as having consciousness, consciousness in self, self in consciousness. That is how you don't falter amid presently arisen phenomena. So that is the background, yeah, that is like the theoretical side of this. And again, the way to see this, the way to make this real, the way to make this possible really only happens when it comes down to meditation practice. And it happens not through some kind of special meditation that you need to do. It happens through the ordinary breath meditation. All you need to do is to do breath meditation to understand these kind of things. But you have to take the breath meditation to a very profound level. When you take it to a very profound level, that is when it starts to have this kind of effect. So then we have the Buddha repeating the verses. So I will repeat them as well, just following along here. So the Buddha now says, he says, don't run back to the past. Don't hope for the future. What's past is left behind. The future has not yet arrived. And phenomena in the present are clearly seen in every case. Knowing this, develop it, unfaltering, unshakable. Today is the day to keenly work. Who knows, tomorrow may bring death. For there is no bargain to be struck with death and his mighty hordes. The peaceful sage explained, it is those who keenly meditate like this, tireless all night and day, who truly have that one fine night. So it's a beautiful verse, yeah. And sometimes I think on the Buddhist path, what we need to do is we need to just remember a few really inspiring things on the path, a few things that just lift you up and guide you in the right direction. And sometimes just remembering even a verse like this, yeah, memorizing it by heart, maybe even just the first 4 lines, yeah, the first 8 lines, something like that. If you memorize that by heart and you keep that in your mind, then you have something that you can always bring out, yeah, to always remind you of what you should be doing, how you should be practicing. Yeah. And I know a lot of people who do that. They just remember some very simple lines of Dhamma and they use that to inspire themselves. So anyway, so coming to the very end of the sutta, and that's what I meant when I said, I shall teach you a passage for recitation and the analysis of one fine night. This is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the mendicants were happy with what the Buddha said. So we have now finished one sutta, which is good news. So we can now move on to the next one. So this is another sutta. I don't think I have ever taught this sutta before anywhere. So you're probably the first ones to hear this sutta taught by me. But it is actually quite an important sutta in terms of meditation practice, because it is really about how to use the body to advance our insight and our understanding and to overcome defilements. That's kind of the idea behind the sutta. Kaya gata sati, sati is mindfulness. Kaya gata means mindfulness aimed at the body. Yeah, mindfulness going to the body. This is quite literally what it means. And the kaya is not just body in an ordinary sense. It means like the sentient body, the body of experience. That's really what it means, the experiential body. And this sutta is about a number of different exercises that we can do in the practice of meditation, in the practice of contemplation. And these practices, you will see, if you are well versed with the Satipatthana Sutta, you will see that the exercises here are exactly the same as in the Satipatthana Sutta. There's only one difference, and that is the jhanas are included in this particular sutta. And as I shall point out later on, the jhanas don't really belong to this particular sutta. It is probably a later elaboration and addition to the sutta. They're not actually part of this. So it's almost exactly the same. It is exactly the same exercises as you have in the Satipatthana Sutta. Now, what is interesting is that there is also a Chinese version of this sutta. There's also a Chinese version of the Satipatthana Sutta. This is the Chinese translation done by Xuanzang and these ancient Chinese pilgrims who went to India and brought the suttas back to China, 1,500 years ago or whatever it is. And when you compare those suttas in Chinese translation, Yeah, these suttas in Chinese translation, they are actually from the Sarvastivadin school. The Sarvastivadin school is not the same as Theravada. It is closely related, but not exactly the same. When you look at those suttas in the Sarvastivadin school, it is actually very interesting, because what you find is that the Satipatthana Sutta, under body contemplation, has a number of additional things. Yeah, and the additional things it has in there are things like overcoming the thinking mind. It has the perception of light in meditation. It has the 4 jhanas, yeah, in the meditation practice. These are all part of the Sarvastivadin Satipatthana Sutta. Now, if you go to the Sarvastivadin version of this sutta, the mindfulness of the body, it has exactly the same extra pieces as you find in the Sarvastivadin version of the Satipatthana Sutta. So what we find is that the mindfulness of the body sutta is exactly the same as the Satipatthana Sutta in the Pali, and the Sarvastivada, the Satipatthana Sutta in Sarvastivada, is exactly the same as the Kayagata Sati Sutta in Sarvastivada. So they are exactly the same, but they are different from each other. The Theravada is different from Sarvastivada. I don't know if that is clear. Maybe what I've been saying has not been very clear. It is almost needs maybe to be put down on paper to be clear. But the point is that the point I'm trying to make is that there seems to be a influence. Yeah, the mindfulness of the body sutta is exactly the same as Satipatthana. It means that there is an influence from one sutta to the other one. And this is very fascinating here, because what it means is that when we read the Satipatthana Sutta, we have to be very careful, because it looks like the Satipatthana Sutta has been expanded over time. It looks like the content of the sutta we're looking at now has been transferred to the Satipatthana Sutta. This is why, and this has happened both in Theravada and also within Sarvastivada, and this is why it seems a plausible thing, because of that parallel way of movement of the content. So because of that, and because some of the exercises that we're going to look at now, it looks like they don't belong to the Satipatthana Sutta. If they don't belong to the Satipatthana Sutta, well, then maybe they belong here instead, in mindfulness of the body. Yeah, because mindfulness of the body is more than Satipatthana. It is broader than that. Mindfulness of the body can be used for all kinds of things, and you find this in the suttas. It can be used for sense restraint. It can be used for developing sati sampajanya, clear awareness of what is going on. Yeah, mindfulness of the body can also be used to develop the meditation practice. Yeah, we have seen this like in mindfulness of breathing, for example. So mindfulness of the body is more broad. And because it is more broad, it is in many areas, it is more basic, it is more fundamental. It starts earlier, it starts with right effort. And because it starts with right effort, it is one of the foundations that we have to put in place for meditation to work. If you want to have success with your breath meditation, then a good place to start is with mindfulness of the body. This creates some of that foundation that makes it possible to do mindfulness of breathing later on. So for this reason, it is very interesting and very useful. And so I want to discuss a little bit about how to do this. Yeah, and some of the parts here, I think, are going to be useful for everyone, especially in how we live in daily life and all of these kind of things. So let's see what this sutta has to say. So I apologize for being a bit technical there, but hopefully we will be able to understand what is going on very shortly here. So this is how it goes. So I have heard, at one time the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery here. Then, after the meal, on return from alms round, several senior mendicants sat together in the assembly hall, and this discussion came up among them. It is incredible reverence. It is amazing how the Blessed One who knows and sees, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha, has said that mindfulness of the body, when developed and cultivated, is very fruitful and beneficial. So here we have the Buddha, again, staying at Savatthi. You will notice how many suttas are from Savatthi. This was the main monastery of the Buddha, and the majority of suttas were actually spoken in this monastery here. And then we have a very standard description here, after the meal. Then very often they would go on meditation after the meal, but sometimes they would also go and have a discussion. They will sit down and they will discuss together. And then while they are discussing, you then find that the Buddha may suddenly show up while you're having a discussion. So you have to be very careful what you discuss. If you discuss the wrong thing, the Buddha will not be impressed. The Buddha might be, he might tell you off for discussing the wrong things. So in this case, the mendicants are having a very nice discussion. They're talking about the mindfulness of the body, the kayagata sati, and they are saying how this is a very powerful way of meditating, of developing your mind through simply awareness of the body. And when the Buddha says something is very fruitful and very beneficial, well, usually what that means, it means something very high, right? The Buddha doesn't use these kind of words the Buddha is always understated. So when he says very beneficial and fruitful, it actually means, probably leads all the way to enlightenment. That's usually what it means when the Buddha is talking about these things. So then the Buddha arrives, but the conversation was left unfinished. Then the Buddha came out of retreat and went to that pavilion. He sat down on the seat spread out and addressed the monastics. Monastics, what were you sitting talking about just now? What conversation have I interrupted or was unfinished? The mendicants, the monastics, told them what they had been talking about, and then the Buddha said, and how, monastics, is mindfulness of the body developed and cultivated to be very fruitful and beneficial? So this is, again, a typical way of how you see things happening in the suttas. The Buddha happens to come to the monks. He sees that they are talking about something useful, and then he expands on what they are saying. You find this in a number of suttas, and it's kind of nice, it's kind of beautiful the way the Buddha kind of does this, and he understands that they need some kind of extra inspiration, and need some kind of extra skillfulness in understanding these things, and he gives them this extra teaching. So how do you actually do this? So if you want mindfulness of body to be very fruitful and skillful, if you want to become an arahant, or a stream enter, or whatever it is, this is what you have to do. So let's go through this stage by stage, and you will recognize many of these things, because if you have read the Satipatthana Sutta, you will see that these things are well known from that Satipatthana Sutta. So this is what the Buddha says. It is when a mendicant has gone to the wilderness, or to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut. They sit down cross-legged with their body straight and establish mindfulness right there. Just mindful, they breathe in. Mindful, they breathe out. When breathing in heavily, heavily, they know I breathe in heavily. When breathing in heavily, they know I'm breathing heavily. When breathing in out heavily, they know I'm breathing out heavily. When breathing in lightly, they know I'm breathing in lightly. When breathing out lightly, they know I'm breathing out lightly. When they practice breathing in, experiencing the whole body. They practice breathing out, experiencing the whole body. They practice breathing in, stilling the body's motion. They practice breathing out, stilling the body's motion. as they meditate like this, diligent, keen, and resolute, memories and thoughts of the lay life are given up. Their mind becomes stilled internally. It settles, unifies, and becomes immersed in samadhi, or they become stilled. That is how a mendicant develops mindfulness of the body. So this is, you will notice straight away, the standard way of anapanasati, how it is mentioned in the suttas. This is just the beginning of the anapanasati. It goes much further than this. It goes all the way to to the jhana states and all of these kind of things. But this is the beginning. This is the starting point, and the starting point is always the most important one. So this is one way then of developing the mindfulness of the body, because the breath is part of the body. So we are dealing with the mindfulness of the body here. So I'm not going to talk too much about this, because we're going to talk about the Anapanasati Sutta later on. I will analyze it in detail later on in the when we come to that point. But I want to point out a few things. The first thing is that Anapanasati here, this is already an advanced way of developing mindfulness of the body. It is advanced because at the very beginning, it says that you go to the wilderness, you go to the foot of a tree, you go to an empty hut, you sit down cross-legged, you establish mindfulness right there. And all of these things, what they point to real meditation. They point to finding a secluded spot, they point to sitting down cross-legged. All of these things point to real meditation practice. This is not some sort of preliminary practice where you focus on the body. This is not about overcoming the kind of initial attachment to the body. This is real meditation practice. And really, because it is about real meditation, it really should have gone a bit further down the list. Some of these other practices that we'll see afterwards are actually more preliminary. This is a deeper kind of meditation. But for some reason, in the Pali, it comes first. In the Sarvastivada version, which I was mentioning before, it is actually the third practice. The two other practices that come after here come first. Then comes the mindfulness of breathing afterwards. And that is a more natural way to kind of, that this should happen. But it doesn't matter. So basically, what this means is that we should not take the sequence of the various practices here too seriously. Because if we take the sequence too seriously, we are likely to miss the point of what this is about. The next one is about walking, sitting, and all these kind of things. And the one after that, again, is about the various activities in daily life. They really belong before the mindfulness of breathing. So the sequence here is probably a little bit messed up, but never mind. That's kind of a small point. So this is about real meditation practice, So mindfulness of the body leads to real meditation when it is done in the right way. And the very last sentence that we have here is really the sentence that is unique for this particular sutta. They meditate like this. They are diligent, keen, and resolute. These are some of those very important words that you find in the suttas: diligent, keen, and resolute. Diligent here is appamada, keen is atapi, and resolute is pahitata, if my memory serves me right. And the idea behind these words, like diligent, appamada, means that you are careful, you are circumspect, you have yoniso manasikara, you have this wise attention that you bring to the meditation practice. You don't do it just kind of empty-headed randomly, but you have awareness all the way throughout. You are clear about whether you are doing the right thing, you're heading in the right direction, whether the meditation is working properly, all of these kind of things. So diligent is not perhaps quite the right word, more like you are heedful or careful or circumspect. You are wise about what you're doing here. This is always important on the Buddhist path. Then you have the idea of keen. The idea of keen is that you have energy inside, yeah, you are inspired to do the practice. And of course, if you do this practice in the right way, because you're already kind of calming down and you're already getting some good emotions coming up, you feel really keen. You feel, wow, this is such a beautiful thing when I do this meditation. It is really working for me. And of course, when you see the real results coming in meditation practice, it feels very powerful. Yeah, you really feel inspired because you know these are not just words on the paper, or in this case, they're not just pixels on a screen. This is kind of the modern version of words on paper. Or they're not just words that have been memorized, but they have real meaning. They point to something inside. And when you see that these words point to something inside, that is when you feel inspired. The keenness arises. You want to practice in this way. You feel joyful, you feel uplifted, you feel the brightness like someone was talking about before. All of these things coming together. You apply yourself a little bit. There's maybe a little bit of effort there, but mostly it is inspiration driving you forward. And the last one here, pahitatta, this is just another way of saying that you have right effort in your practice. Pahitatta is related to the word padana, and padana means right effort. Yeah, so you are diligent, you feel inspired in what you're doing, your mind is pointing in the right direction, yeah, as you do this. And when you do this in the right way, the memories and thoughts based on the lay life are given up. Based on the lay life basically means all the kind of ordinary attachments that everyone has in the world, yeah? The attachments to maybe to family is going down a little bit, the attached to possessions are going down a little bit. And as these memories, I think the Pali here is sara and sankappa, as these memories and thoughts are kind of going down, of course, that means your defilements, your hindrances are going down. And because your hindrances are going down, it means that you are achieving, gradually, you're achieving deeper states of samadhi as you do this. You're giving up the hindrances. You can see this is a different way of talking about the same process as we always talk about in meditation. Yeah, the idea of giving up the defilements of the mind, giving up the hindrances through the breath meditation by being wise about what you're doing, and then achieving samadhi, achieving stillness as a consequence. So a very, very succinct way of talking about meditation practice, yeah? This way of giving up these memories and thoughts of the lay life, the ordinary attached thinking in the world. This is what kind of comes out of this. And this is something that you see in a few places in the suttas, yeah, this idea of giving up these memories and thoughts based on the lay life. So it is an important part of the process of meditation. So how does it happen? What is the process by which it happens? And the process is simply watching the breath. Yeah, all you have to do is watch the breath, and as you watch the breath, these defilements start to disappear. It's like magic, right? You watch the breath and defilements go away. Why is that the case? Why do defilements disappear when you watch the breath? Why is that natural? And the reason why it is natural is because the way that defilements in the mind are sustained, they are sustained because we feed them. We feed those defilements, yeah? To be able to be attached, to be able to be interested in something, to be able to have a fantasy about something, you have to feed that fantasy. The defilement is always fed by more thinking. But if you stick to the breath, you are starving that feeding mechanism. You're no longer feeding that mind which always wants to be fed by fantasies and all these things. So by staying with the breath, because you're not thinking about it, you're not feeding the mind these sensual thoughts, it means they all calm down and they gradually disappear. And because they gradually disappear, you attain eventually samadhi by following this process. So this is kind of how the meditation works. And also, of course, as you are practicing meditation, as you are experiencing the delight and the happiness that comes from the meditation experience itself, you give up those things of the world. You let go of them because you understand that there is a greater kind of happiness. So these two things together, working together, yeah, starving the mind of that input which makes you attached, and also finding an alternative happiness that is more profound than the happiness of the world. And then you keep on. You carry on the mindfulness of breathing. And if you carry on the mindfulness of breathing, there comes a point when the mind becomes settled internally, yeah, as it says here. It settles, it unifies, it becomes stilled in samadhi. Stilled in samadhi. So this very last part here, being settled internally, stilled internally, settled and unified and immersed in samadhi, this is just another way of talking about the jhana experiences. Yeah, so by practicing the mindfulness of breathing in the right way, undermining defilements, bringing the mind together in this way, you achieve jhana. This is what the sutta is saying here. So it is very powerful, yeah, and this is kind of the point here. So it's important to also realize that there is here a number of steps. We're talking about the mindfulness of breathing. It comes here to the breathing. You breathe stilling in the body's motion. Yeah. After that, there's a number of more steps that you have to take before you actually get to samadhi. So this is like a contracted form. A number of steps are missing in between. But the point is that if you keep on doing this practice in the right way, you take it all the way to the end, then this is the consequence. You achieve samadhi because of that. So that is the very humble breath. Yeah, the very humble breath is such a powerful meditation object that it leads to all of these wonderful things here. That is how a mendicant develops mindfulness of the body here.